My childhood friend spread rumors that destroyed my engagement. 5 years later, she showed up at my door saying it was all a misunderstanding. The rain wasn't supposed to start until evening, and that's what I remember most clearly about the moment the past refused to stay buried. Veronica was standing on my front porch with mascara running down her face, not from the rain that had started 3 hours early, but from crying. She looked different than I remembered, thinner and harder somehow, like 5 years had aged her 15. She said my name like a question, like she was not sure I would recognize her, and I felt my hand tighten on the doorframe until my knuckles went white. I had not seen Veronica Brennan since the week before my wedding was supposed to happen, the week she had told my fiancée Claire that I had been sleeping with her for months, that I had gotten her pregnant, that I was planning to leave Claire at the altar. None of it had been true, but by the time I could prove that, Claire was gone, and our life together was destroyed. Now Veronica was on my porch saying it had all been a misunderstanding, and I wanted to slam the door in her face so badly my arm was shaking. Instead, I asked her what the hell she wanted. She said she needed to explain, that she had made a terrible mistake, that she had been going through something 5 years ago and had not been in her right mind. The rain was coming down harder now, soaking through her jacket, and part of me wanted to let her stand out there and drown in it. But my neighbor Mrs. Chen was watching from her window across the street, and I did not want to give the neighborhood something else to talk about. I stepped aside and let Veronica in, not because I forgave her or wanted to hear her excuses, but because I needed to understand how someone I had known since we were 8 years old could have destroyed my life so completely and then had the audacity to show up asking for forgiveness. She walked into my living room dripping water onto the hardwood floors, leaving dark spots that looked like evidence of a crime scene. I told her she had 5 minutes to explain herself, and then I wanted her gone from my house and my life forever. Veronica and I had grown up 3 houses apart, in a subdivision outside of Portland. Her family had moved in when we were both in 3rd grade, and we had become friends the way kids do, through proximity and shared bus stops and parents who were friendly with each other. We had been inseparable through elementary school, close through middle school, and then had drifted apart in high school when she got into the theater crowd and I joined the debate team. But we had stayed friendly, the kind of friends who would grab coffee when we were both home for holidays, or like each other's social media posts without really talking. When I got engaged to Claire 4 years after college, Veronica had been genuinely happy for me, or so I thought. She had hugged me and said Claire was lucky to have me, that I deserved all the happiness in the world. 3 months later, she was telling Claire that I was a cheating liar who had been using both of them. The accusations had come out of nowhere, landing like a bomb in the middle of our wedding planning. Claire had called me at work, her voice shaking, asking if I had something to tell her. When I asked what she meant, she said Veronica had just left her office, had sat down across from her desk, and told her everything. That I had been having an affair with Veronica since before I proposed, that Veronica was pregnant with my child, that I had promised to leave Claire but kept delaying, that Claire needed to know the truth before she married me and ruined her life. I had laughed at first, the kind of disbelieving laugh that escapes when something is so absurd you cannot process it as real. I told Claire that Veronica was lying, that I had barely spoken to her in months, that I had never cheated and would never cheat. But Claire had said Veronica showed her text messages, screenshots of conversations that looked like they were between us, intimate messages about meeting up and keeping our relationship secret. I told her those messages were fake, that I had never sent them, that someone must have doctored them somehow. Claire said she wanted to believe me, but the messages had my phone number, had details about my schedule that only I would know, had inside jokes that Veronica would not have known unless we were actually talking. How could I explain that? I could not in that moment, and my inability to immediately prove my innocence had planted doubt in Claire's mind that grew like poison. If you are enjoying this story already, please subscribe to see more stories like this. I had gone straight to Veronica's apartment that evening, so angry I was shaking. When she answered the door, she had this strange, calm expression on her face, like she had been expecting me. I demanded to know what she had told Claire and why she would make up such vicious lies. Veronica said they were not lies, that we had been seeing each other, that I was in denial because I was scared of losing Claire. I told her she was insane, that we had not been seeing each other, that I had text records and phone logs that would prove I had barely communicated with her in the past year. She said those would not show the burner phone I had been using to contact her, the secret email account we had set up, the careful way we had hidden our affair. Every accusation was crazier than the last, and I realized I was arguing with someone who either genuinely believed these delusions or was so committed to the lie that she could sell it convincingly. I asked her why she was doing this, what she possibly had to gain from destroying my relationship, and she started crying. She said she was sorry I was upset, but that Claire deserved to know the truth, that I could not keep living a lie. Then she put her hand on her stomach, a theatrical gesture that made me feel sick, and said our baby deserved a father who was honest. I left her apartment knowing that nothing I said would change her story, that she had decided to burn my life down and was going to stick with it no matter what. The next few days were a nightmare of trying to prove a negative. How do you prove you did not do something? I showed Claire my phone records, my text message history, my emails. None of them showed any inappropriate communication with Veronica. But Claire said that was exactly what Veronica had told her I would say, that I had been using untraceable methods to communicate, that the lack of evidence was not the same as evidence of innocence. I suggested we confront Veronica together, that I could take a polygraph test, that I would do anything to prove I was telling the truth. Claire said she needed time to think, that she was not sure what to believe anymore. The doubt in her voice destroyed me. We had been together for 3 years, engaged for 6 months, and one conversation with my childhood friend had made her question everything about who I was. I understood, intellectually, that Veronica's accusations were convincing, that she had constructed a believable story with just enough detail to make it seem real. But emotionally, I was devastated that Claire could even consider the possibility that I would do something like that. The trust that should have been the foundation of our relationship was cracking, and I could feel everything we had built starting to collapse. Claire called off the wedding 4 days later. She said she could not marry me with this cloud of uncertainty hanging over us, that even if I was telling the truth and Veronica was lying, the situation had revealed problems in how we communicated and trusted each other. She said we should take a break, give each other space to figure out what we really wanted. I knew what a break meant. It meant she had already made her decision, but was trying to soften the blow. I begged her to reconsider, to give me a chance to prove that Veronica was lying, but she had already moved her things out of our apartment. She left behind the engagement ring on the kitchen counter, next to a note that said she was sorry, but that she could not do this anymore. The wedding was supposed to be in 3 weeks. We had to call everyone, cancel the venue, the photographer, the caterer, explain to our families that the wedding was off because my childhood friend had accused me of getting her pregnant. My parents believed me immediately, said Veronica must be mentally ill or vindictive or both. Claire's parents believed her daughter, said that where there was smoke there was usually fire, that maybe this was a blessing in disguise if I was the kind of man who would cheat. The division was clean and brutal, and within a week, I had lost not just my fiancé but the entire life we had been building together. I tried to confront Veronica again, to understand her endgame. If she was pregnant like she claimed, there would be proof eventually. A baby would either exist or it would not. DNA tests would prove paternity or they would not. Her story had an expiration date built into it, and I could not understand why she would tell a lie that would inevitably be exposed. When I went back to her apartment, she would not let me in. She spoke to me through the door, said she had filed for a restraining order because I was harassing her, that if I came back, she would call the police. I asked her again why she was doing this, what I had done to make her hate me enough to destroy my life, and she said I knew what I had done, that I could not escape consequences forever. Then she told me to leave, or she would start screaming. I left before the neighbors could witness whatever scene she was planning to create. A week later, I was served with a temporary restraining order requiring me to stay at least 100 yards away from Veronica Brennan. The order cited harassment and threatening behavior, allegations I had never committed but that now existed in legal documentation. My own childhood friend had turned me into a legal threat. The restraining order killed any remaining chance I had with Claire. When she found out about it, she said it proved that something inappropriate had been going on between Veronica and me, that normal friends did not need restraining orders against each other. I tried to explain that Veronica had filed it to prevent me from proving she was lying, but Claire said I needed to stop blaming Veronica and take responsibility for my own actions. She said she was going to block my number and move on with her life, and that I should do the same. That was the last conversation we ever had. I spent the next 3 months in a fog of depression and anger, barely going to work, letting my apartment fall into disarray, wondering how my life had gone from planning a wedding to being the subject of a restraining order based on lies. My friends did not know what to believe, and the ones who sided with me eventually stopped calling because I was too miserable to be around. The ones who believed Veronica's story cut contact entirely, sending me messages about how disappointed they were, how they never would have expected this from me. I lost Claire, lost half my friend group, lost the future I had been planning, all because Veronica Brennan had decided to invent a relationship that never existed. The restraining order expired after 6 months, and nothing happened. No baby appeared. Veronica never pursued child support or tried to contact me about parental responsibilities. She just disappeared from social media, stopped responding to mutual friends who asked about the situation, became a ghost. I thought about hiring a lawyer to sue her for defamation, but what was the point? The damage was done. Claire was gone, our friend group had splintered, and my reputation in our hometown was permanently damaged. People would always remember that I was the guy who got accused of getting his childhood friend pregnant while engaged to someone else, regardless of whether the accusations were true. I moved to Seattle for a fresh start, took a new job as a financial analyst at a tech company, and tried to build a life that had nothing to do with Portland or Veronica or the wreckage she had left behind. For 5 years, I succeeded. I dated occasionally but never seriously, too afraid of letting someone get close enough to hurt me the way Claire's doubt had hurt me. I made new friends who knew nothing about my past. I created a life that was smaller and safer than the one I had lost, and I convinced myself I was content with it. Now Veronica was in my living room, and all that carefully constructed peace was shattering. She was talking, saying words that sounded like an apology, but felt hollow and rehearsed. She said she had been in a dark place 5 years ago, that she had been obsessed with me since we were teenagers, that seeing me engaged to Claire had broken something in her brain. She said she had convinced herself that we were meant to be together, that Claire was in the way, that if she could just remove Claire from the picture, then I would see that Veronica and I belonged together. The pregnancy had been fake. The text messages had been fabricated using apps that let you create fake conversations. The whole elaborate story had been designed to drive a wedge between Claire and me. She said she thought that once Claire was gone, I would turn to her for comfort, that we would finally be together the way we were supposed to be. Instead, I had gotten a restraining order and moved away, and she had been left alone with the guilt of what she had done. She said she had been in therapy for 3 years, working through her issues, and that her therapist had encouraged her to make amends as part of her healing process. So here she was, soaking wet in my living room, asking me to forgive her for ruining my life, because it would help with her healing process. I asked her if she had any idea what she had taken from me. Did she understand that Claire and I were supposed to get married, buy a house, have children? Did she comprehend that her lies had destroyed all of that, had made Claire doubt me so fundamentally that she walked away from 3 years together? Did she grasp that I had spent 5 years unable to fully trust anyone because the woman I loved had believed my childhood friend over me? Veronica said she understood, that she knew she could never truly make it right, but that she wanted me to know the truth. She wanted me to know that she had lied, that I had been innocent all along, that everything she told Claire was fabricated. I asked her why she thought I needed her confession when I had always known I was innocent. She said because maybe I could reconnect with Claire now that the truth was out, maybe I could get back what she had stolen. That comment made me laugh, bitter and sharp. I told her that Claire had moved on with her life 5 years ago, that she was probably married with kids by now, that there was no getting back something that had been dead for half a decade. Veronica said she had actually looked Claire up before coming here, that Claire was still single, still living in Portland, still working at the same firm. She said maybe it was not too late, maybe Claire would believe me now that Veronica was willing to admit she had lied. I told Veronica to get out. She had come here for absolution, to make herself feel better about the destruction she had caused, and I was not going to give it to her. She started crying again, saying she was so sorry, that she was a different person now, that she had been sick back then, but was better now. I said being sick was not an excuse for destroying someone's life, that plenty of people went through dark times without inventing elaborate lies to break up their friends' relationships. I asked her what she expected me to do with this information, with her confession that she had fabricated everything. She said she had written it all down, a detailed statement admitting to the lies, and she would give it to me if I wanted it. She pulled a folded envelope from her jacket pocket, the paper damp from the rain, and held it out to me. I took it, not because I forgave her, but because I wanted proof. After 5 years of people thinking I was a cheater and a liar, I wanted documentation that I had been telling the truth all along. I told Veronica I never wanted to see her again, that her apology meant nothing to me, and that she should live with the guilt of what she had done for the rest of her life, the way I had lived with the consequences. She left without another word, and I stood in my living room holding her confession and feeling nothing but emptiness. I did not open the envelope right away. I put it on my kitchen counter and stared at it for 3 days, trying to decide what to do. Part of me wanted to burn it, to pretend Veronica had never shown up and continue living my carefully constructed life in Seattle. Another part of me wanted to take it to Claire, to show her proof that I had been telling the truth, that Veronica had destroyed us with calculated lies. But what would that accomplish? Claire had made her choice 5 years ago. She had chosen to believe the worst of me instead of trusting that I was telling the truth. Even if I could prove now that I had been innocent, it did not change the fact that she had doubted me when it mattered. On the 4th day, I finally opened the envelope. Inside was a 3-page handwritten letter in Veronica's distinctive looping script. She detailed everything: the fake text messages created using a spoofing app, the fictional pregnancy that never existed, the way she had researched my schedule to make her lies more convincing. She admitted that she had been obsessed with me, that she had constructed a fantasy relationship in her mind and then tried to make it real by destroying my actual relationship. She wrote that she understood if I never forgave her, but that she needed me to know the truth. At the bottom, she had signed and dated it, like a legal affidavit. It was exactly what I needed to clear my name, and I had no idea what to do with it. I called my sister Rachel, the one person who had stuck by me through everything 5 years ago. She lived in Boston with her husband and 2 kids, and we talked every few weeks to stay connected. When I told her about Veronica's visit, Rachel was silent for a long moment before asking if I was sure the confession was real. She said Veronica had been manipulative and deceptive before. What if this was another game? I told her I had thought about that, but I could not figure out what Veronica's angle would be in confessing to lies that made her look terrible. Rachel said some people got off on attention and drama, that maybe Veronica wanted to insert herself back into my life by offering this confession. She asked what I was planning to do with it, and I said I did not know. Rachel said I should talk to a lawyer, figure out if I had any legal recourse after all this time, if I could sue Veronica for damages or file criminal charges or something. She said I deserved justice, that Veronica should face real consequences for what she had done. I told her I would think about it, but part of me just wanted to be done with the whole situation. Revenge and lawsuits and dredging up the past all sounded exhausting, and I had spent 5 years trying to move forward. Did I really want to spend the next year looking backward? But the confession sat on my counter, calling to me every time I walked past it. After a week, I made an appointment with an attorney named Lisa Thornton, who specialized in defamation and personal injury cases. Thornton had been practicing for 22 years and had a reputation for being thorough and aggressive. When I showed her Veronica's confession, she read it carefully before looking up at me with an expression I could not quite read. She said that what Veronica had done could potentially constitute several crimes: filing a false police report when she got the restraining order, defamation of character, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The problem was that most of these had statutes of limitations, and 5 years was potentially past the window for criminal prosecution. However, she said, I might still have options for civil litigation. If I could demonstrate quantifiable damages, loss of income from having to change jobs, therapy costs from the emotional trauma, even the financial loss from the canceled wedding, I could potentially sue Veronica for those damages. Thornton said the written confession was powerful evidence, that it would make the case much easier to prove, but that I needed to decide if pursuing legal action was really what I wanted. Litigation was expensive, time-consuming, and emotionally draining. Was I prepared for that? I told Thornton I needed to think about it, but that I wanted her to keep the original confession in her files as evidence in case I decided to proceed. She made copies and locked the original in her safe, telling me to take my time making a decision. On my way out, she mentioned one other thing I might want to consider. She said that if I was interested in clearing my name publicly, rather than just legally, I could share Veronica's confession with the people who had believed her lies 5 years ago. Let them know that I had been telling the truth all along, that Veronica had admitted to fabricating everything. It would not give me back the time I lost or repair all the damaged relationships, but it might give me the vindication of people knowing I had been innocent. That comment stuck with me. I had spent 5 years living under the cloud of Veronica's accusations, knowing that half my old friend group thought I was a cheater, that Claire's family thought I had betrayed their daughter. The idea of those people knowing the truth was appealing in a way that surprised me. I started with my old roommate Keith, someone who had known both Veronica and me since college. Keith had been skeptical of Veronica's accusations 5 years ago, but had ultimately distanced himself from the drama, staying neutral by cutting contact with both of us. When I called him and explained that Veronica had confessed to making everything up, Keith was quiet for a long moment before saying he had always suspected something was off about her story. He asked if I had proof, and I sent him a photo of the confession. Keith said he was sorry he had not stood by me more firmly, that he should have trusted his instincts about my character. He asked if I had shown it to Claire yet, and I said no, that I was not sure I wanted to. Keith said I should, that Claire deserved to know the truth even if we were never getting back together. He said she had carried guilt about calling off the wedding, had questioned her judgment, had struggled with the idea that she had abandoned me when I might have been innocent. Giving her the truth would be a kindness, not for me but for her. That perspective had not occurred to me. I had been so focused on my own pain that I had not considered how Claire might have suffered too, wondering if she had made the right decision. I reached out to Claire through a mutual friend, asking if she would be willing to meet me for coffee to discuss something important. The friend, Natasha, called me back an hour later and said Claire was hesitant but curious. She would meet me at a neutral location, the same coffee shop where we had first met 7 years ago. The irony was not lost on me. On the scheduled day, I arrived 15 minutes early and sat at a table near the window, the envelope with Veronica's confession in front of me. When Claire walked in, I barely recognized her. She had cut her hair short, dyed it a darker shade, and there was a weariness in her eyes that had not been there 5 years ago. She sat down across from me without ordering anything and said I had 10 minutes to explain why we were here. I slid the envelope across the table and told her to read it. She looked at me with suspicion before opening it, and I watched her face change as she read Veronica's confession. First confusion, then shock, then something that looked like grief. When she finished, she looked up at me with tears in her eyes and asked if this was real. I said yes, that Veronica had shown up at my apartment 3 weeks ago to confess, that everything she had told Claire 5 years ago was a lie. Claire put her head in her hands and started crying, not dramatically but in the quiet way of someone whose worst fears had been confirmed. She said she had always wondered, always had that nagging doubt about whether she had made the right decision. She said she had convinced herself that she did the smart thing by walking away, that if there was even a chance I had cheated, then she was right to protect herself. But the doubt had eaten at her for 5 years, had made her question her judgment, had prevented her from fully trusting anyone else. Now she knew that her doubt had been correct, but in the worst possible way. I had been telling the truth, and she had abandoned me anyway. She asked me to forgive her, and I said there was nothing to forgive, that Veronica had constructed a convincing lie with fake evidence, and that Claire's reaction had been reasonable. But Claire said it was not reasonable, that she should have trusted me, that 3 years together should have counted for more than one conversation with someone we barely kept in contact with. She said she had thrown away the best relationship she had ever had because she let fear and doubt override love and trust, and that she would regret that for the rest of her life. I told her that we had both lost something, that Veronica had destroyed both of our lives with her lies, and that there was no point in playing the blame game now. We sat in silence for a while, two people who had once planned a life together, now strangers connected only by shared trauma. If this story keeps your interest, please subscribe to get more stories like this. Claire asked me what I was going to do with Veronica's confession. I told her I was considering legal action, that my attorney thought I might have a case for civil damages. Claire said she wanted to be involved, that she wanted Veronica to face consequences for what she had done. She said she had lost 5 years to the aftermath of Veronica's lies, years she spent questioning herself and struggling to trust anyone, and that Veronica should not get to walk away with just a guilty conscience. I told her I would talk to Lisa Thornton about whether Claire could be included in any legal action, that maybe we could build a stronger case together. Claire said she wanted that, wanted to do something active instead of just sitting with the pain of what we had lost. Before she left, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand. She said she was sorry for not believing me, sorry for not fighting harder for us, sorry for all of it. I said I was sorry too, for reasons I could not quite articulate, and then she was gone. I sat in that coffee shop for another hour, thinking about alternate timelines where Veronica had not lied, where Claire and I had gotten married, where we had built the life we had planned. Those timelines existed somewhere in the multiverse, but not in this one. In this reality, we were just two damaged people with a confession from the person who had damaged us. Lisa Thornton was intrigued when I told her Claire wanted to be involved in legal action against Veronica. She said having a second plaintiff would strengthen the case, would demonstrate a pattern of harm, rather than just a single instance. Thornton scheduled a meeting with both Claire and me to discuss our options. At that meeting, Claire brought documentation I had not known existed. Text messages from Veronica sent after the initial accusations, messages where Veronica had continued to spread lies about me being a deadbeat father who refused to acknowledge our child. Claire had saved everything. Screenshots of Veronica's social media posts where she alluded to being a single mother abandoned by the father of her child, messages she had sent to mutual friends painting me as a villain. The documentation was damning, showed a sustained campaign of defamation that had continued long after I moved to Seattle. Thornton said this was excellent evidence, that it demonstrated ongoing harm and malicious intent. She outlined a legal strategy. We would sue Veronica for defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with prospective economic advantage since I had to leave my job and relocate to escape the rumors. We would seek both compensatory damages for the harm she caused and punitive damages to punish her behavior and deter future similar conduct. The lawsuit was filed 3 months after Veronica showed up at my door. She was served with papers at her apartment in Portland, and according to the process server, she had looked shocked and terrified when she realized what she was being sued for. Her attorney, a public defender named Mark Grayson, reached out to Lisa Thornton asking if we would consider settling out of court. Thornton said absolutely not, that we wanted this case to go to trial, that we wanted Veronica's lies exposed in a public legal proceeding. Grayson said his client was prepared to admit to everything in her written confession, that she would not contest the facts, but that she did not have significant financial resources to pay damages. Thornton said that was Veronica's problem, not ours, and that she should have thought about the financial consequences before destroying 2 people's lives. The case proceeded to discovery, where both sides could request evidence and documentation. Thornton subpoenaed Veronica's medical records related to her supposed pregnancy, which of course showed no pregnancy had ever existed. She subpoenaed Veronica's phone records, which showed she had used apps to create the fake text messages. She subpoenaed witnesses, mutual friends who Veronica had told different versions of her lies to, creating a timeline of her deception. The trial was scheduled for 14 months after we filed the lawsuit. In that time, I had to relive the worst period of my life over and over again, giving depositions, reviewing evidence, preparing testimony. It was emotionally exhausting, but it was also clarifying. Going through the documentation with Lisa Thornton's legal team, I could see just how calculated Veronica's campaign had been. This was not a woman who made one impulsive mistake in a moment of mental illness. This was someone who had systematically constructed a believable fiction, maintained it for months, and then continued spreading variations of it for years after I left Portland. The mental health issues she claimed to have had might have been real, but they did not excuse the deliberate cruelty of her actions. Claire was going through the same process, reviewing her own evidence and preparing her own testimony. We met occasionally to coordinate with our legal team, and slowly, carefully, we were rebuilding something that might eventually become friendship. Not romance, too much damage had been done for that, but mutual respect and shared purpose. We were united in wanting Veronica to face real consequences for what she had done. The trial began on a Monday morning in October, almost 6 years after Veronica's initial lies. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, less dramatic than television had led me to believe. Judge Patricia Kensington presided, a woman in her late 50s who had been on the bench for 18 years and had a reputation for being fair, but stern. Veronica sat at the defendant's table looking smaller than I remembered, her shoulders hunched and her face pale. When her attorney asked her how she pleaded to the accusations, she said guilty, that she did not contest the facts of the case, but wanted the court to consider her mental state at the time of the incidents. Her attorney presented evidence of Veronica having been diagnosed with obsessive love disorder and borderline personality disorder, said she had been in intensive therapy and was doing much better now, asked the court for leniency given her mental health struggles. Lisa Thornton objected, said that mental illness might explain behavior, but it did not excuse it, that Veronica had been functional enough to plan and execute a complex scheme of lies and had never sought help until after the damage was done. The judge allowed the mental health evidence into the record, but made it clear it would not be a get-out-of-jail-free card. Claire testified first, describing the day Veronica came to her office, the convincing details of the fake affair, the screenshots of text messages that seemed irrefutable. She testified about calling off the wedding, about the years of self-doubt and inability to trust that followed, about the therapy bills and the damaged relationships. Under cross-examination, Veronica's attorney tried to suggest that Claire's decision to call off the wedding was her own choice, that Veronica's lies might have been a factor, but that Claire had free will. Claire responded that when someone presents you with what appears to be concrete evidence of infidelity, choosing to protect yourself is not free will, it is survival. The jury, 6 women and 6 men ranging from mid-20s to late 60s, listened with expressions that ranged from sympathetic to disgusted. When it was my turn to testify, I described the restraining order, the job I had to leave, the city I had to relocate to, the reputation that was destroyed. I presented evidence of the therapy costs, the career setback from leaving a good job, the quantifiable financial harm Veronica's lies had caused. I also testified about the non-quantifiable harm, the inability to trust new relationships, the 5 years of knowing that people thought I was a deadbeat father when no child existed, the pain of losing Claire not because of anything I did, but because of someone else's malicious fiction. The most damaging testimony came from Dr. Raymond Fisher, a forensic psychologist with 34 years of experience who had reviewed all the evidence and interviewed both Veronica and her therapist. Dr. Fisher testified that while Veronica did have documented mental health issues, her behavior showed clear premeditation and awareness of consequences. The use of spoofing apps to create fake text messages required technical knowledge and planning. The sustained nature of the lies over months and years showed this was not a brief psychotic episode, but a deliberate campaign. Dr. Fisher said that Veronica's current remorse might be genuine, but it was remorse for facing consequences, not necessarily remorse for the harm she had caused. Under cross-examination, Veronica's attorney tried to get Dr. Fisher to say that someone with borderline personality disorder might not have full control over their actions, but Dr. Fisher held firm. He said mental illness could affect impulse control and emotional regulation, but Veronica's actions showed sustained planning that indicated she knew what she was doing and chose to do it anyway. The jury took notes during his testimony, several of them nodding along with his conclusions. Veronica took the stand on the 3rd day of the trial. Her attorney had advised her to show remorse and take responsibility, and she tried, but it came across as performative. She cried while describing how obsessed she had been with me, how she had convinced herself we were meant to be together, how destroying my relationship with Claire had seemed like the only way to make that happen. She said she was deeply sorry, that she had been sick, that she had done terrible things she regretted with every fiber of her being. But when Lisa Thornton cross-examined her, the facade cracked. Thornton asked Veronica why, if she was so remorseful, she had continued spreading lies about me for years after I left Portland. Why had she posted on social media about being abandoned by her child's father when there was no child? Why had she told mutual friends variations of the story long after the immediate crisis had passed? Veronica stammered, said she had been maintaining the fiction because admitting to the lies would have been too humiliating. Thornton asked if Veronica understood that her desire to avoid humiliation had resulted in years of additional harm to both me and Claire. Veronica said yes, she understood that now. Thornton asked if Veronica had reached out to correct the lies with any of the people she had told them to. Veronica said no, she had not wanted to make things worse. Thornton suggested that Veronica had only confessed because her guilt had finally outweighed her selfishness, not because she cared about the harm she had caused. Veronica's attorney objected, but the damage was done. The jury had seen her exposed as someone who prioritized her own comfort over the truth. The jury deliberated for 6 hours before returning with a verdict. They found in favor of Claire and me on all counts. Defamation, guilty. Intentional infliction of emotional distress, guilty. Interference with prospective economic advantage, guilty. The compensatory damages were calculated based on lost wages, therapy costs, wedding expenses, and other quantifiable harm, totaling $328,000. The punitive damages, designed to punish Veronica and deter future similar conduct, were set at an additional $500,000. Veronica's face went white when the verdict was read. Her attorney immediately indicated they would appeal, but Judge Kensington denied the appeal as frivolous, said the evidence was overwhelming and the verdict appropriate. The total judgment against Veronica was $828,000, an amount she would likely never be able to fully pay. Lisa Thornton said we could pursue garnishment of her wages, seizure of assets, and other collection methods, but that we should not expect to see the full amount. What we had gotten was better than money. We had gotten public vindication, a legal declaration that Veronica had lied, that we had been telling the truth all along, that the harm she caused was real and substantial. The verdict made local news in Portland. Friends who had believed Veronica's lies reached out to apologize, saying they felt terrible for doubting me, that they wished they had stood by me 5 years ago. I accepted their apologies but did not invest much energy in rekindling those friendships. The people who had believed I was a cheater based on one person's word were not the kind of friends I needed in my life. Claire and I met for coffee a week after the trial ended, both of us processing what the verdict meant. She said it felt good to be vindicated, but that it also felt empty, like we had won a battle but the war had already cost us everything that mattered. I understood what she meant. No amount of money or legal victory could give us back the 5 years we had lost, the life we had planned, the trust that had been shattered. Veronica would face financial consequences for decades, her wages garnished and her credit destroyed, but that did not repair the damage she had done to us. Claire asked if I had any regrets about pursuing the lawsuit, and I said no, that I needed to do something active instead of just accepting what had been done to me. She said she felt the same way, that the trial had given her agency in a situation where she had felt powerless for too long. We talked about Veronica, about what would drive someone to do what she had done. Claire said she had been reading about obsessive love disorder and borderline personality disorder, trying to understand the psychology behind Veronica's actions. She said people with these conditions could become fixated on targets of their affection to the point of delusion, genuinely believing in relationships that did not exist, justifying harmful behavior as protecting the imagined relationship. It did not excuse what Veronica had done, but it helped explain it. I said I had done the same research and had come to a similar understanding, that Veronica was probably suffering from real mental illness that had manifested in destructive ways. But I also thought there was an element of choice in how she had acted, that mental illness influenced behavior but did not completely remove agency. She had chosen to use spoofing apps instead of seeking help. She had chosen to file a false restraining order instead of being honest. She had chosen to maintain the lies for years instead of coming clean. Those choices had consequences, and the verdict was those consequences finally catching up to her. Claire agreed, said that compassion for someone's mental health struggles could coexist with holding them accountable for their actions, that one did not cancel out the other. 6 months after the trial, I got a message from Veronica. She was not supposed to contact me directly per the terms of the judgment, but she sent an email to my attorney that Lisa Thornton forwarded to me. In it, Veronica explained that she was filing for bankruptcy, that she would never be able to pay the full judgment, that her life was essentially over. She asked if I would consider settling for a reduced amount or agreeing to a payment plan she could actually afford. She said she was not trying to escape responsibility, but that the financial burden was making it impossible for her to move forward with her life. Lisa Thornton asked me how I wanted to respond. I told her to reject the settlement offer, that Veronica's difficulty moving forward with her life was exactly the kind of consequence she deserved. Thornton said that was my right, that we could continue pursuing full collection efforts even if it took decades. But she also pointed out that sometimes the victory was in the judgment itself, not in the money collected, and that I might find more peace in letting go of the financial pursuit and just letting the judgment stand as a permanent record of what Veronica had done. I thought about that for a long time. What did I actually want? Revenge? Justice? Closure? In the end, I told Thornton to continue collection efforts but not to spend excessive resources on it, that if Veronica truly had nothing, then there was no point in bleeding a stone, but that I wanted the judgment to hang over her for as long as legally possible. Claire made a different choice. She accepted a reduced settlement from Veronica, $25,000 paid over 5 years, and in exchange signed a release forgiving the rest of Veronica's debt to her. When she told me about it, I asked why she had agreed to such a small fraction of what she was owed. Claire said she needed to close this chapter of her life, that holding on to the debt meant staying connected to Veronica forever, and she wanted to be free of that connection. She said the trial had given her what she needed, the public acknowledgement that she had been wronged, and that her decision to call off our wedding had been based on manipulated information rather than poor judgment. The money was secondary to that validation. I understood her reasoning even though I did not share it. For me, the continued financial consequences for Veronica were important, a constant reminder to her that actions had lasting effects. For Claire, letting go was more important than holding on. We were both dealing with our trauma in different ways, and neither way was wrong. A year after the trial, I was in a different place emotionally. I had started dating someone new, a woman named Iris, who worked as a veterinarian and had no connection to my past in Portland. I told her about Veronica and the trial early in our relationship, wanting to be transparent about the baggage I was carrying. Iris listened to the whole story without judgment, then said that it sounded like I had been through something traumatic, but had fought back instead of being a victim, and she respected that. We took things slowly, both of us cautious about getting too serious too fast, but it felt healthy and real in a way my relationship with Claire had felt before Veronica destroyed it. I was learning to trust again, learning that not everyone would believe the worst of me, that some people would actually fight for the relationship instead of running at the first sign of trouble. Iris was one of those people, and I was grateful for that. I still thought about Claire sometimes, wondered what our life together might have looked like, but those thoughts were less painful now and more wistful. We had both lost something, but we had also both moved forward, and that was what mattered. Claire got engaged to someone else 18 months after the trial. I heard about it through mutual friends and felt genuinely happy for her. Her fiancé was apparently someone she had met through work, someone who knew about her past and loved her anyway. She deserved that kind of uncomplicated happiness after years of self-doubt and regret. I sent her a congratulations card, nothing elaborate, just a simple acknowledgement that I was glad she had found someone. She sent me a thank you note back, saying she hoped I had found peace too, that we both deserved to be happy after everything we had been through. That exchange felt like the final closing of a chapter, the last communication we would probably ever have. We had been important to each other once, had loved each other enough to plan a lifetime together, but that version of us existed in the past. The people we had become were different, shaped by trauma and loss and the slow work of rebuilding. We could acknowledge what we had meant to each other without trying to resurrect something that had died 5 years ago. Veronica disappeared from my life entirely after the bankruptcy proceeding. I heard through the legal grapevine that she had moved to another state, changed her name, and was trying to start over somewhere no one knew about her past. Part of me thought that was fitting, that she was now living with the same kind of fresh start in an unfamiliar place that I had been forced into 5 years ago. Another part of me thought it was too easy, that she should have to live with her reputation the way I had lived with mine. But ultimately, what Veronica did with the rest of her life was not my concern. I had gotten what I needed from the trial: validation, vindication, and the knowledge that she had faced real consequences for her actions. The money did not matter as much as I thought it would. The legal judgment was worth more than the dollars it represented. It was proof, documented and official, that I had been telling the truth all along, that the people who had doubted me had been wrong, that Veronica had manufactured everything. That proof was priceless. 3 years after Veronica showed up at my door in the rain, I married Iris in a small ceremony with just close friends and family. Claire was not there, obviously, but I thought about her during the vows, about the wedding we had planned that never happened. I wondered if she was thinking about me too on her own wedding day, whenever that had been. Probably not. We had both moved on, but there was symmetry in both of us eventually getting the happy endings we had been denied 5 years ago. At the reception, my sister Rachel gave a toast about resilience and second chances, about how I had faced something that could have broken me and had come through it stronger. She did not mention Veronica by name, but everyone there knew what she was referring to. The friends who had stood by me through the trial, the family who had never doubted me, the new people in my life who had accepted my past without judgment. They were all there celebrating something that almost did not happen because of one person's lies, and their presence felt like its own kind of victory. Sometimes people ask me if I regret pursuing the lawsuit, if the years of legal battles and reliving trauma were worth it. I always say yes without hesitation. The lawsuit was not about money or revenge, though those were components. It was about refusing to let Veronica's lies be the final word on what happened to Claire and me. It was about insisting that truth mattered and that people who destroyed others with lies should face consequences. It was about taking back power in a situation where I had felt completely powerless. The trial gave me agency, gave me the ability to fight back instead of just accepting what had been done to me. That was worth every difficult moment, every painful deposition, every hour spent reviewing evidence that reminded me of the worst time in my life. Because in the end, the verdict was not just a legal judgment. It was a statement that I had worth, that my life and reputation mattered, that Claire's pain and loss mattered, that Veronica's actions had been wrong and harmful and unacceptable. We lived in a world now where anyone who Googled Veronica's name would find the trial results, would see that she had been found liable for defamation and emotional distress, would know what kind of person she was. That permanent record was justice. The rain was not supposed to start until evening, and that is what I remember most clearly about the moment the past refused to stay buried. But what I remember second most clearly is the choice I made when Veronica stood on my porch asking for forgiveness. I could have taken her confession, closed the door, and pretended the last 5 years had not happened. I could have let her seek absolution without consequences, let her move on with her healing while I stayed stuck in the damage she had caused. Instead, I chose to fight back, to demand accountability, to insist that her actions had consequences that could not be erased with a tearful apology. That choice led to a year of legal battles and emotional exhaustion, but it also led to vindication and closure and the ability to finally move forward without the weight of unanswered lies hanging over me. Veronica had tried to bury me with her fiction 5 years ago, but when the past showed up in the rain refusing to stay buried, I chose to excavate the truth instead. And the truth, documented in legal records and jury verdicts, and the wreckage of Veronica's own life, set me free. Thanks for watching till the end. Make sure to subscribe and like to not miss the next story.